Hello, and welcome to another NABBW Financial Podcast. Tonight, I'm with regular guest Pam Sams to discuss our very important February topic, how the blending of financial planning and love, which for many of us can be a point of discord, can instead be a perfect match. Have you ever fought with your significant other about money, or did you grow up in a family where these sorts of things happened? I'll admit that money and spending habits were often a sore point for me and my first husband, and I'm not alone in that experience. Apparently, 1/3 of married couples fight about finances at least once a month, and statistics show disagreements about money are the second leading cause of divorce, just behind infidelity. Even if you are in the lucky minority and arguments over household spending are rare for you, you have probably felt tension over your finances at some time or other. A study released by Northwestern Mutual found that money was the leading cause of stress among Americans, and this stress escalates when you add in a second party, whether significant other, spouse, or some other person who's important to you, who might have different ideas about money handling. It's no secret that financial issues can stir up emotions and cause stress in our everyday lives, which is why many couples end up trying to preserve their marital peace by never talking about money. Now, if you think about it, each of us has our own opinion on how to best manage money, and most of us also have a unique financial personality. Some of us are savers, some are spenders, some of us tend toward fiscal conservatism, while others are free spirits. It's these individual personality differences that can lead to friction and discord, which eventually impacts all the other aspects of a relationship. It's probably why some people believe living happily ever after only truly exists in fairy tales. Money can be a hot topic for couples. I know people whose marriages dissolved when one spouse discovered that the other had secretly spent everything in a joint savings account, or conversely, because one partner discovered the other had a secret financial stash. And my experience is not so rare. Research I found while preparing for this call actually shows that 19% of Americans, all adults, in a live-in relationship are hiding a bank account from their partner. Additionally, a 2020 poll by Personal Capital revealed that 53% of respondents found talking about money with their significant other is stressful. That same poll found that 35% of respondents have kept secrets about financial decisions in order to avoid conflict. As Pam is no doubt going to be advising us, this sort of secrecy is unfortunate. Financial counselors working with couples always recommend that it's important for both partners to provide full disclosure of their finances and be open about expenses, regardless of whether you're married or you live together, whether you have joint or separate bank accounts. Ideally, both you and your spouse should be aware of how you are spending your money, especially when it comes to significant expenses, loans, or ongoing fees. By maintaining an open line of communication regarding spending habits and upcoming bills, you may be able to avoid financial arguments. But I'm talking way too much here and getting ahead of myself. Audience, before Pam and I dive into our February Heart Month discussion about how financial planning and love can be a perfect match, let me introduce this call. I'm Ann Holmes, your moderator and the Boomer-in-Chief of the National Association of Baby Boomer Women, an organization dedicated to educating and empowering women at midlife and beyond. And with me is Pamela J. Sams, BFA, CRPC, MBA, and trusted advisor to professional women. Pam is a chartered retirement planning counselor and NABBW's retirement planning associate. An expert in personal finance, Pam is president of Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies in Herndon, Virginia, and a monthly guest who covers important information related to money and financial planning. Welcome, everyone, to our February 2022 financial Zoom call covering the confluence of love and money. We're glad you've joined us. Now, before we can launch into tonight's discussion, I need to play a quick audio clip just to keep us legal.
Securities offered through Securities America Incorporated, a registered broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Incorporated, a SEC registered investment advisory firm. Pamela Sams, investment advisor representative. Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies, Securities America Incorporated, and all other entities named are separate entities.
Okay, we're official now. Thanks for joining us, Pam.
Thanks, Ann, for having me once again. And here we are in February, Heart Month, Love Month, whatever you want to call it. Here we are talking about, once again, love and money. and relationships. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And when you read a lot of those statistics, and what I see as well is sometimes when I have couples into the office, the money conversation or retirement or whatever their goals are, or perhaps some of the first times that they've actually discussed
Mhm.
it. And then it's in front of a third party. So
Right.
sometimes there may be a little bit of a conflict or some surprises that happen in
Mhm.
the conversation where it's like, I didn't know you wanted to do that in retirement, or I didn't know you wanted to go there. So
Right.
it's pretty interesting conversations to navigate sometimes when I'm sitting in front of couples dealing with their money.
I bet it is. And the thing is, ever since we were kids, our parents, I think, teach us that you're not supposed to talk about money. It's not polite to
Mhm.
talk about money. And that is apparently bad advice because, well, maybe our parents don't want us to reveal, how much our parents make or things like that,
Mhm.
which is not politically correct conversation. But we really need to have the opportunity for younger children to start to learn about money at some time younger than we are in the situation for
Mhm.
doing right now. I'm so glad that you've mentioned about there's now some high schools that have investment clubs and that sort of thing.
Yes, exactly. It's coming out of it's becoming one of the topics that people are addressing in the schools
Mhm.
and local communities for financial literacy. So that's a good thing.
And another good thing I think is the 10 points that we're going to cover tonight.
Mhm.
So let's start with your first point, relationships and money, which I've alluded to, but I know that you have more to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to your relationships and get started, either with your spouse or your significant other or who you are spending your life with, is really to understand what the relationship is with money, kind of getting that out in the open sooner rather than later to
Mhm.
understand their money views, their habits, and get a better understanding if you can get that earlier on in the relationship. So everyone has their own beliefs, habits, experiences surrounding money, and it starts from childhood to adulthood. I'm sure we've talked about it in previous calls on understanding people's actually their own relationship with money, and then how do you operate in a relationship with
Mhm.
money with someone else as well. Um, it, I always suggest that people, if they're either going to get married or they're fairly serious about starting a relationship, is really to start with meeting with either a marriage counselor to understand it, maybe a financial advisor ahead of time to really understand how people's views are in that money relationship a little bit earlier on.
Mhm.
I saw a funny thing online the other day, and it said it was a kind of a cartoon, and it said the person was proposing to her, and she said, "I can't. I'm in a committed relationship," and then handcuffed to her was a $250,000 student loan bill.
Oh, right. Yes.
So knowing that going in, how you're going to address that a little bit early on, that's a significant debt. You're
Mhm.
proposing to somebody, but then they have a significant student loan debt, or may have a significant loan, or may have had bankruptcy in the past. Really understanding what that relationship is going to be going in. Soon, like I said, sooner rather than later, trying to understand where your spouse or your significant other stands as it relates to their money and their money relationships, their habits, their behaviors, and what some of the things they may be bringing to the table.
Oh, you're so correct about that. As you were talking about that, I was remembering um, a man that I was dating for quite a while before I met Steve. And we happened to go to a wedding. It was a family wedding where my brother was marrying into a family from Texas that had been able to make several generations earlier had been able to make a lot of money
Mhm.
in the oil, and they had managed that money well over time. So they were a significantly well-to-do family. And I took my date and we went to Texas for this wedding. And he was just so uncomfortable at the parties that we went to, because there was like 3 or 4 days of parties before the wedding. And
Mhm.
I've never been to a wedding where you have days and days of parties before.
Mhm.
And I mean, George W. Bush was there. He was not president or vice president at the time, but he was there. So you kind of get
Mhm.
the idea
Yeah,
of
exactly.
this. And my date, he told me people who have money are evil. And so he
Mhm.
hated being there because he was so uncomfortable with all these people. And I was thinking,
Mhm.
well, I do not believe that just having money makes you evil. I don't think that I can have an ongoing relationship with a person who thinks that way.
Yeah,
Not that I had that kind of money, but I just thought I can't support a relationship with a guy who thinks that way.
yeah, and like I said, knowing that sooner rather than later is
Mhm.
probably
Right.
the best case scenario that you can have, because then, in a situation where you are married and if you are amassing at least some type of wealth, it may become an issue because at
Hmm.
some point he may hit um, what I call a financial thermometer. There's only
Hmm.
so far you can go up before you
Right.
feel that, okay, this is excessive, I don't need it. And then, that could deter the relationship. So knowing that beforehand
Hmm.
is a good thing that you found that out. One of the other things that happens in relationships earlier on is sometimes we have the viewpoints of basically mine, yours, and ours.
Hmm.
So sometimes, people are a little bit guarded with the things that they think are theirs, and you go into a joint situation, everything's supposed to be at least kind of ours. And sometimes
Hmm.
people hold things to the vest where, no, that's mine,
Hmm.
and that's
Right.
yours, and those sort of things. So really understanding where people may be coming from in terms of ownership on certain things as well is best to know a little bit earlier
Hmm.
on in the relationship, as well as what are the rules of engagement, so to speak, in this particular situation. If it's going to become serious relationship, understanding kind of the rules of engagement as it deals with money, what the habits are, what the experiences are around money, just like you had mentioned before, rich people or people who have money are evil
Hmm.
type of
Right.
thing. Then you're like, whoa, wait a minute, I may be this is not for me. That could be a
Hmm.
deal breaker in a situation. Or if you did continue to pursue that, knowing that is something that may pop up a little bit later on in the relationship.
Hmm. Excellent. And something too many probably people who get into their first relationships don't have the knowledge to be aware of. So I'm
Mhm.
glad that we're talking about it here. Your point number two is open communication.
Yes, and you mentioned that in the earlier on as well in the open, and it's really without a doubt communication really is key in
Hmm.
these relationships when it comes to making sure you're on the same page with your money. You should be comfortable in communicating with each other as you feel about money and how you manage it in the relationship, taking regularly talking regularly about money as and both understand where the other person is coming from as it drives to their money beliefs as well. So you had mentioned kind of this hiding things, and I've heard it called financial infidelities because
Hmm.
there's no open communication with it, and there may be some hiding of funds, separate accounts, or purchases. I met a lady several years ago, and she had kind of this shoe fetish, and she would buy shoes, but her husband really didn't want her to buy, these expensive shoes. So she would end up buying them, but then keeping them in a secret stash in the garage. So she wouldn't bring it into the house, but she had an area in the garage that obviously I guess he wasn't privy to or didn't go to, that she would hit it. So eventually, I'm sure he probably figured out. She's like, wait a minute, there's a new pair of shoes every time. Or maybe men are just oblivious to shoes that they probably don't even recognize that it was a new pair of shoes. But that was something that she wasn't open with
Hmm.
him about with that. So really understanding your relationship with money, as we had mentioned before, but the open line of communications as it comes to money as well, and none of this financial infidelity. And again, the rules of engagement. So if there is let's say big ticket items that you wish to purchase, maybe there is a certain level that you need to kind of come to the table and figure out, do we buy this particular thing if it's over $300 or $400, understanding and speaking with your spouse or your significant other to say, I am buying this. Is it in the budget, number
Mhm.
one, and then getting, I wouldn't say consent, but really understanding where things are with that, instead of all of a sudden there's money missing out of the account. Oh, by the way, I spent $500 on something. That feels really bad in a relationship as well, because there are certain things that we did, I'm going to bring up the budget again, as I always do in every
Mhm.
phone call,
Right.
is that if $500 or $600 may be missing out of that, and you have things allocated to certain bills, now you have something missing. Now you could be bouncing checks, or you could not have enough to cover the bills for the month. So having the open line of communications and understanding where the money is going, making sure it was in the budget, have the rule set that maybe is over a certain purchase amount,
Mhm.
that you at least notify your spouse or your significant other that you are buying it, that it's budgeted for. Maybe the person, you maybe got a raise and you wanted to splurge a little bit, but understanding that's the open line of communication as it comes to money, and not hiding and feeling guilty about certain things, really just trying to open up that line of communications with money.
Oh, that's the story that you told there in the beginning reminded me of a story that happened to me and Steve, and so I understand how important the open communication is. I'm going to share this story. Shortly after we married, and we had each kept our own checking accounts on our own credit, but we still had a joint account for things like paying the mortgage and other things that were joint. But we had only been married a month or two, and um, there had been a time, I don't know if all around the country there's stores called Von Maur, but in the Quad
Mhm,
Cities there's Von Maur stores.
mhm,
And I had happened to be in a Von Maur store, and I have a shoe love, or I used to. I am kind of reformed from it. But I walked past the shoe department at Von Maur, and they were having this fantastic sale. And I stopped in, this was after work one day, and I decided to try on a couple of pairs of shoes, and I ended up buying 4 pair of shoes. Now, I had never bought 4 pairs of shoes at once ever, but I did. And then I had this 4 pairs of shoes in my car, and I'm getting home, driving into our new garage that we have as a house together. And I'm going, oh, I don't think I want to bring these in right away. I need to explain to Steve what I did, and then I can bring the shoes in. So I put them in the trunk. And then I forgot about them. Legitimately, I
mhm,
didn't wear them. I didn't have a secret place that I put them on in the garage. They were in my trunk and I wasn't wearing them.
mhm,
And the mail came, and Steve decided to be a helpful person and open the mail. And he sees this Von Maur bill for me, because he thought he was opening his Von Maur account, but it
mhm,
was mine. And he sees this charge and he calls them up and he tells them there must be a mistake. And they look at the receipt and they come back to him and they say, no, sir, it has her
no,
signature on it.
yeah.
And so I come home and he's going, did you actually buy 4 pairs of shoes from
Shoes.
Von Maur? And I go, yeah, I did. Yeah. But it was funny because we were still, newlyweds, and
Mhm,
we were still getting used to each other's situations. He's a guy who, doesn't wear or doesn't have dozens of pairs of shoes like I. At
uh-huh.
that point, when I would go on a work travel, I had to take an extra suitcase practically, just because every
Yeah,
one
just
of
for
my
shoes. Yeah.
every one of my outfits had a different pair of shoes. But
Mhm,
I've much toned that down these days. But he just didn't understand that about women, because it
mhm.
was a first marriage for him, and he hadn't understood that some people like to buy
Yeah.
shoes.
Yeah, some women like to buy shoes. That's what I was doing, unfortunately, during the pandemic.
Hmm.
There was those all these BOGOs, buy one get one
Right,
free from these shoe stores. Wasn't going anywhere at all, but
right.
I it came across my account, on the internet. They follow you with
Mhm.
these ads and such, and it's, oh, those are cute shoes, and then they
Mhm.
keep sending you coupons, and then you feel
Right.
that you're buying a bunch. So yes, that was something that we do, and men have to recognize that yes, we
Right.
do buy shoes as
Mm.
well. But yes, that's one of the things that like you said, you hit them in there, and then the bill comes, and you're like,
Mhm.
wait a minute, the shoe
Right.
doesn't match, and they haven't seen new shoes.
Right.
So
Yeah.
what is this bill
He
about?
was absolutely positive that there was an error because he had not seen me wearing any new
Yeah, we
shoes.
haven't seen you wearing your shoes. Yes,
Right.
exactly. And how
Right.
long did you keep them in the trunk?
Probably a month. Yeah. Because I totally forgot about him. It wasn't
That's
that
a
I was
funny one.
waiting for a proper time to tell him about it. Once they were in my trunk, I just didn't think about them. They were until I came
Yeah.
home and he
And so
said,
you came home and he's like,
right,
wait, I've been caught with
right,
with the
yes,
shoes
right,
purchase.
yes. All right. So open communication, very, very important.
Very, very important.
Point number three, discuss values in your relationship.
Yeah, really discussing lifestyle choices together, and marriage and relationships, often there's compromises by knowing what the significant other values that, but in my practice, actually, I do a values-based exercise as part of my planning process. And when I do it with couples, I tell them to do the values exercise separately in different
Hmm.
rooms or in different words, so there won't be any either influence, so to speak,
Hmm.
on that. And then I try to see what the values exercise goes down from basically all of the values. There's about 64 different ones in a card deck. And then you keep going down to your top 15, your top 10, and then ultimately to your top five.
Hmm.
So I do a comparison on what the couples come up with what their top five values, and see if there's some intersection of them. Sometimes they're in alignment. Sometimes they're just totally off
Hmm.
or what their values are. And then that really facilitates a discussion on what is your most value, what do you value most in life, and
Hmm.
then matching that. So, if there's lopsided where somebody in their thing could be wealth or money as one of their top values, and then somebody else is on the other side of that, could be given to charity or philanthropy and all of those sort of things, there may be some different things going on. So understanding what the values are in relationships is really important. Yes, there may be some compromise as well as it relates to that, but understanding that comes back to that communication piece, understanding what is important to your
Hmm.
spouse or your significant other as it relates to their values, because it, there are basically going to be lifestyle choices that you need to work on together. And
Hmm.
understanding the value system of each person makes that a little bit easier as you're putting together your lifestyle choices, your financial plan, and your way that you operate around money really relates to your values as well.
Hmm. And I think what yours would say is that one person's values aren't necessarily
Mhm.
better than another's. It's
Yeah,
just that you'd have to have some congruency in a relationship.
exactly. Yeah, some congruency
Hmm.
with that. For example, when I was working with a fairly young couple, I think they had been married a few years as well. One grew up, basically kind of in a impoverished type of situation. So it was all about spam and eating the
Hmm.
basics and the bare minimums. And then we had the husband was, hey, I have the money. I think I need to, have some nice things, and I want to buy some stuff. So
Hmm.
they were conflicting on that because of their goals were not in alignment, because one was very, very frugal with it. And then the other said, we have the resources, we can do this, but nobody wanted that. She didn't want to spend, he didn't want to compromise, and there was a conflict. So enter Pam as a third party
Hmm.
mediator in a
Right.
situation like this to try to figure out, okay, are there some compromises? You have money now, you
Hmm.
know this person, and let's make sure we're out of that mindset where it's scarcity,
Hmm.
because so you sometimes you have to develop out of certain things that we grew up with, our money beliefs and our habits, with that. And then to come to at least on the same table as your spouse who's like, hey, we're making plenty of money, we're doing well. We
Mhm.
don't need to be in a mindset where we're looking at scarcity mentality versus
Mhm.
prosperity with that. So I think I got them pretty on, on a good page, on a good footing to
Oh, that's
understand
great.
that, but understanding the values first, because that's why they were butting heads until we did the values exercise. That's when we were able to discover some of the things that may have been hidden that she
Mhm.
really wasn't sharing a little bit earlier on.
Okay, that's very interesting to think about that.
Hmm.
I'm glad you told us about that um, process that you do with the values. Um, Point number 4 on your list is financial personality.
Yes, so that's similar to what I just explained, is understanding what your number one, what your financial personality is like, and then also what your spouse's significant other's personality. And there are generally 4 different personality types when it comes to money. One is a spender, so we know what that is.
Mhm.
Spending enjoys that spender enjoys money on spending money on themselves and others. They tend to do so freely and then sometimes very impulsively. So the persons in the store, they're probably going to be buying and taking advantage of those. You were in marketing as well, and you know how it goes. And is that you got this on the way to the checkout line, you got all these goodies
Mhm.
that really
Right.
those impulse buys. So this spender is going to be picking up a lot of those things on the way to the cash register because they like to spend money on themselves, others, kind of the squirrel mentality. Oh, that looks great. Let me go ahead and spend it. So sometimes a little bit more freely and
Mhm.
impulsively than they should. So that's the spender. The saver, they're really careful. That's why I mentioned before in my previous in the previous answer is that she was very, very careful with the money and believed that was really important to cut costs, setting aside money for rainy days. What we call money hoarders sometimes, or extreme examples of savers because
Mhm.
they're ultra thrifty and they live to save.
Mhm.
So in my couple that I used before, she was tremendously frugal
Mhm.
when it came to money. So she was on a saver. Not to say he was more of a spender, but she was tremendously one of those money hoarders that really didn't want to spend a whole lot as well. Then we have the amassers. These are the ones who they're a little bit different than savers. They like to save money, but they also look at the bigger picture, such as building wealth and financial security for the long term. So these are amassers of wealth. Example of this would be a client that I had, for a long time. Unfortunately, he had an untimely death. He had passed away suddenly, but he was amassing an amount of wealth that I told him he could have retired, basically 10 years earlier, but he was in the mindset of I need to amass enough for financial security. And unfortunately, never really got a chance to enjoy his retirement because he passed away. So
Mhm.
sometimes you have these amassers who really just like building wealth for the long term, and then at some point may become where they're a saver, where they don't want to spend a whole lot as well. Then you have the avoiders. Avoiders. These are money avoiders that take a hands off of money at a new level. Really, they don't like to think about money. They don't like to talk about money, put
Mhm.
their hands on it, managing it, any of this. So, I have a lot of avoiders that I work with as well. Is that I call it kind of the ostrich mentality. If I put my head in the sand, I don't think about it, I don't do anything about it, it'll go away.
Mhm.
These are avoiders when you come with money. So when you take the same approach with money, there needs to be some grounds on managing the money as well. So with determining who you are, what your personality is, but also who you're working with in your relationship, you need to know that again, what are the rules of engagement, really to set the ground rules for how you're going to manage it. So if you have a spender saver situation, really understanding that no, we can't spend everything. We have a budget. We need to
Mhm.
stick within our budget. And then on the other side of that, we need to also have with that saver not being so tight and being a money hoarder, because you do need to spend money on things as well. But understanding how, again, back to communication, where people are coming from with their money personality. So, for example, if you decide to keep bank accounts maybe separate than
Mhm.
the mingling money, set up a
Right.
joint account where things funnel into that, so you can pay the necessary bills, and then that spender may have a little bit of an allowance or a side account where they can, set things up that they can spend on it. But
Mhm.
really having boundaries that both are comfortable with can reduce some of the odds and running into money disagreements as it relates to each other's money personalities. So that's really what you need to understand. Number one, what your money personality is, and then secondly, how your spouse and or significant other is operating with their money personality as well.
Do people ever change their money personality, or is it kind of like ingrained into people?
Um, it's I wouldn't say ingrained there. You can, just like what they call the synapses in your brain, you can, but it's a learning process over time to understand that if you're dealing with the polar opposites of it, you can see it a lot better when you're dealing with that, because sometimes you come to the table and there be a little bit more compromise
Mhm.
with that. But if you're kind of operating on your own and you really don't have a whole lot of any a significant other or person involved, then there may not be much of a change of habit there unless you work with somebody like myself or a professional that deals with behavioral financial planning or advice,
Mhm.
and then you can kind of start to change some of those habits as it relates to their money habits and their mindset.
Excellent. And now I understand why you have that training in behavioral finance.
Yes.
All right, your point number 5 is money quirks.
Yeah, this is interesting. Over the last 20 years that I've been doing this, you run into some funny things when it comes to people's money little quirks. I ran into, a person several years ago. All of the money in their wallet needs to be particularly in order in denominations, and then it also has to be facing in the same direction. So uh and that's how it works, and
Mhm.
anything out of that is somewhat uneasy when it comes to that. Or some people don't like breaking big bills. They'll scratch and scrape and all of these for change, but you're like, hey, you got a $20 bill, you have a $50 bill, don't
Mhm.
want to spend that. but
Okay.
but want to spend the others, or they don't like to have a lot of change around. So you have some things like that. Or, one of the things I saw is where wrapping smaller bills into larger bills as well, or picking up a coin when it's heads up. You've probably seen the kind of the money thing that you have a penny on the ground, and either
Mhm.
you pick it up or you don't. But if it's not heads, you don't pick it up
Ah.
versus that sort of thing. The other interesting I read about is buying everything in twos, because
Hmm.
it's really kind of having a spare to balance things out. People tend to prefer having things rather than odd numbers, so they'll buy in twos.
Mhm.
So you'll have some of these money quirks that people deal with, and understanding how it relates to your relationship. So when you get together with your spouse or your significant other earlier on, and they start having some of these quirks, you don't think it's. I mean, yes, it may be a little odd, but
Mhm.
understanding where they may be coming from. And some of it is actually cultural. Some of it, unfortunately, there are some superstitions around certain things as well. In buildings, they don't have the 13th floor for obvious
Mhm.
reasons, that 13 is unlucky. So a
Right.
lot of it may be cultural relation as it deals with your money. In some cultures, they don't tip. So going into a restaurant and you want to tip, and then your spouse is saying from another culture, like, what are you doing?
Mhm.
We don't tip. Understanding that as well. In some religions, they don't they can't gain interest. So looking at certain investments that don't collect certain things or amass in interest. So understanding some of these, I wouldn't, those cultural things, they're cultural, so they're not quirks, but really understanding some of the philosophies of certain religions, certain cultures as it relates to money as well when you first get into a relationship. So if you're, with a Jewish person or Muslim religion and or a Hindu religion, some of the money beliefs and some of the money habits may be a little bit different than what
Mhm.
we're used to in the U.S. So understanding that when you're in a relationship as it relates to money, and understanding that it's not one of the quirks, it is philosophy and it is the way that people operate with money in certain cultures as well. But knowing that that's kind of that open communications when you develop your relationships and understanding how certain cultures operate with money a little bit earlier on, so you don't think it's too quirky or too weird or anything like that. But that's kind of where you need to look at in that area.
It's interesting. Yeah, it reminds me of that. The last thing that you're talking about reminds me of that TV show I really enjoy called The United States of Al. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you watched that show or not, but Al is from uh, Afghanistan, I think. So
hmm
he moves to the United States, and he has huge cultural problems with things like understanding situations like how people deal with money and how people deal
hmm
with dating and all kinds of cultural situations that are different.
Yeah.
So
hmm
um, it's important for us to realize that there are actually people like that. It's not just a comedy show. So
Yeah.
uh,
Not just a comedy show, and it's very,
right.
and it's very important. So I wouldn't, in a relationship, I wouldn't tell people, of course, not to change habits that are definitely cultural as well, but it's more of an understanding and a communication. So you're aware. It's all about awareness and understanding where it's coming from as well.
Mhm.
Some of these other things, just kind of quirky, but as it relates to philosophy and cultural differences in their religion, really just make sure you're understanding in that aspect.
Okay, excellent. Your next point, financial strengths.
Yes, and here is really talking about finding the strengths in a relationship.
Okay.
So for me and my husband, I deal with, of course, all of the household finances. Even if I probably wasn't, he would probably have me dealing with the household finances. He just doesn't like doing that. He's busy. He wants to do all of the other things, sports and looking at
Mhm.
other stuff. So whose strengths are play better with that? I had some, relationships or some clients that the person who did not have the greatest strength with dealing with money was dealing with money, and then it went all kaput, and then they're like, wait, maybe we need to switch roles here,
Mhm.
and understanding that. So you want to play to the financial strengths of your significant other and understanding who needs to take care of it, because in a household where you're dealing with money, somebody has to step up, or you can do it jointly, but
Mhm.
understanding who has the higher strength when it comes to dealing with money, who has the, I guess, the best tolerance as well,
Mhm.
because sometimes some people just don't want to deal with it and they would rather be doing something else. So understanding who has the best strength when it comes to dealing with money. I have some clients who are really great with spreadsheets. Have an aerospace guy who has the best budget spreadsheet ever.
Mhm.
So that's his strength. He likes to put everything in there. I mean, down to almost the tenth of a cent as it comes to budget. And his wife is, she's just as educated as a software engineer. But so they play to each other's strengths as it comes to money. But that's where you want to look at in your relationship is who's best, who needs to play that role, and then really yielding to that. Or you can do it jointly as well.
Well, I can see positives to either way, to have the person who is stronger at it do it, or to do it jointly. But I'm,
Mhm,
having the one person who's better at it, the thing that worries me about something like that, if the other party doesn't know anything about it, is that if something should happen to the party who's handling the money,
mhm,
then um, the other person doesn't really have a clue what's going on.
Yeah, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
Okay, all right. Excellent. Then I just anticipated where you're going, I guess.
Yes, you just set that up.
All right. Well, point number 7 on your list is, unless you have more on financial strengths, I don't want to rush you.
No.
Okay,
Financial
well,
strength is that it is what that really does play into each other's strengths as it relates
okay.
to your money.
All right. Then point number 7, be a team.
Yes, so that comes to the point where you want to be on the same page as it comes to your finances. Um, as in a team situation. So you
Mhm.
don't want to have this whole mine, yours, and that sort of thing. You want to make sure you're both on the same page as it relates to your money, and not. Yeah. So if you are going to do your financial plan, if you're on the doing your goals, really understanding that we're working towards a common goal here, either retirement at a certain age or educating the kids and being able to put money towards particular goals. Just make sure you're working in alignment and being on the being a team player as it
Mhm.
relates to your money. Because sometimes if you're like have conflicting goals, I want to do this, but I want to do this. I want to retire at this age, but I also want to do this. Sometimes that could be a conflict. So you want to make sure you're always on the same team as it relates to your overall financial goals.
All right. And point number 8 is when I'm really looking forward to having you explain a little bit about it, and that is financial date nights.
Yes, which that was kind of the setup that you did with having somebody handle all of the finances and a financial date night. That's where you're doing basically kind of the State of the Union
Mhm.
situation. So you're dealing with, and I always tell people to set them up as something fun. Money can be a little bit boring, also intimidating sometimes. But if you make it fun in a date night, I always tell people wine, cheese, whatever you need to do, make it fun as a date night. And that's where you talk about the household finances, where you are, kind of the State of the Union, where certain accounts, how much is in each account, how are we tracking with our financial goals. You can do that as often as you would like, once a week, every 2 weeks, monthly, however you want to do that. But that is where you start to look at what kind of, like I said, that State of the Union, where things are in your financial life and where things are. So if the primary person who is in charge of the finances, walking that other person who doesn't do the bills or the things on a day-to-day basis, we have accounts here, there's our accounts over here, our advisor is this, our insurance person is this, and understanding where everything is and keeping things in a fairly in a document, maybe electronically, maybe something in paper. But this is what you would do in those financial date nights, is really understanding where is the financial, basically all of the financial things that operate in your household, and get that State of the Union. So everybody's on that same page, as I talked about before, as it relates to the money and the finances of your home.
It would seem to me also that you could use you said you could have your financial date nights as often as you want, like monthly, or maybe you said weekly, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
But if you have um, a goal that the two of you are working toward, like paying down your credit cards, or
Mhm.
building your savings, or some financial goal of that nature, I would think that a financial date night makes a very palatable way uh, you have like dinner and a movie, but in the middle between the dinner and the movie, you're going to have this little discussion about
Yeah.
how the finances are going. And I think
Mhm.
that in our household, what I've been noticing lately is um, we finish dinner, then we watch some television until it's time for bed. And what I've been noticing lately is when it's time for me to start getting ready to go get ready, and Steve watches TV while I'm doing the early part
Mhm.
of getting ready for bed, then
Yeah.
he's been getting really talkative lately, and he wants to chat, and it's important stuff that he's bringing up, and I'm thinking,
Yeah.
why is it that we're not talking about this until the end of the night? Why couldn't we have made this something that we just talk about earlier before it's time
Mhm.
that I'm trying to get out of the room?
Exactly. Or are you tired and you're not
Mhm.
digesting the information properly as
Right.
well? So yes, this should be something that's planned ahead of time, not ad hoc that happens all of a sudden type of
Right.
thing. Really, it's like, hey, Thursday night or Friday night or whenever you decide to do it, this is where we're going to do our date night and make it a thing.
Mhm.
But try to be consistent in it as well. Um, and make sure you have a kind of a standing meeting with that. So I had some couples that had started doing it and then it fell off, and I'm like, "Are you still doing those?" And it's like, "Eh, it kind of fell off a little bit because he wasn't really into it." I was like, "You need to really make sure you emphasize the importance of that financial
Mhm.
date night, so everybody understands what's going on in the household as well." So I think they're back up and running with the financial date night, maybe not as frequently as they had before, but it's coming back.
Mhm. All right. Point number 9 on your list is action plan.
Yeah, so after all is said and done, kind of with your money in your relationship is really understanding, kind of having that game plan or that financial plan, having some way that you're going to tackle your finances after you've kind of figured out what people's money quirks are and all of the values and all of that, understanding and putting together an action plan. So then generally that's usually financial plan that you put into what are our goals? What are we working towards? Are we paying down debt? Are we saving? What are we doing for retirement? What are we doing with the kids? That sort of thing.
Mhm.
But this is where you would put that action plan in place after you know everything about your spouse or your significant other as it relates to their money. But
Mhm.
that's where you put the plan in place.
And what might be parts of the plan? What would be included?
Yeah, that's really the financial goal. So, if you're paying down your debt, how much debt we have, number one, and then how are we going to tackle it? Are we going to do a snowball where are you paying down the highest, the smallest balances first, and then
Mhm.
kind of subsequently pay those off? Do you want to do an avalanche, which basically you go from the highest interest rate down, so you kind of avalanche it down. So really understanding which way you want to go
Mhm.
and your action plan to reduce debt. Same thing with retirement. Where are retirement plans? How much are we putting into them? Are we funding them properly? When do we want to retire? Because that's back to that open communication. Because I've
Mhm.
seen some funny things over the last 20 years where somebody was wanted to retire in one place warm, somebody wanted to stay put, or they wanted to move to someplace totally different. So understanding what is going to happen in retirement, what are people's
Mhm.
goals? I had that conflict with my own husband, is that he likes to be close to water. He wanted some lake property. And we're here in Virginia, and I was thinking more of kind of where we are, maybe going down further towards Virginia Beach area, where you get some water. But at first, he came up with, Erie, which is like way cold, but
Mhm.
there's a nice
Right.
lake there. But I'm not going there. And I heard somebody who told me when we went to visit, because my son goes to school up that way, is that you want to get out of Erie between October and March
Yes.
because it's just totally a mess. Cold, all of those sort of things. That wasn't going to be the game plan, but that was what he came up with. And I was like, no, no, we have to develop a whole different action plan on what we're looking at retirement. So we did kind of settle on kind of the Southern Virginia area part, get some lake property, and don't have to deal with a great lake and cold weather.
Mhm.
But this is what that action plan would be: understanding where we are and our goals, what they are, what our values are. Because for him, he wanted something that was peaceful and serene and like
Mhm.
property. That was one of his values as well. And so that's kind of what we settled on in our action plan. But knowing where he was coming from and what was important to him, um, I wanted to make sure we kind of put something that was in alignment, definitely not going out there because that
Mhm.
was against where I wanted to do. I was like, if we're going to do it, I have to be a snowbird where I have to go and have some other property someplace else because I just wasn't going to deal with the cold. But we were understanding each other and then really put together kind of that action plan. The funny thing about that, he's probably going to be retiring in the next 5 or 6 years. And then so he's starting because he's one of those go-getters. He likes to
Mhm.
put things in place right away. So the area that we are looking at, we're gonna either buy or build. Next thing you know, I'm getting emails from builders, calls from realtors. I mean, this is like 5 or 6 years from now, but
Right.
it was part of the action plan. He put it into place. And I'm like, and I told him, wait, we got to hold off a little bit on that. So I had people calling and builders and stuff. And I
Mhm.
still on the list. I still get properties listings and such. But that's kind of where what you would put in that action plan is all of the things that you're working on financially, the values that you came up together, the values
Mhm.
exercise that I do with my clients, I've actually done with myself and my husband as well. So the values would be in that plan as well to make sure we're in alignment with each other as it relates to our overall financial goals.
Well, that totally makes sense. And I've never been to any part of near Lake Erie, but I have heard about the weather. But maybe he
Yes.
just didn't know about the weather.
I
The
think you know about the weather. He's always liked cold weather. He didn't mind. He doesn't mind. he
Oh,
just
okay. All
he doesn't
right.
mind. But I, on the other hand, it's like I need something fairly warm, not
Mhm.
nothing that's going to be brutal in the winter time. And he likes, like I said, big lakes and stuff like that. So
Right.
I think we've got it accomplished.
It sounds like you found a place with big water, but not so
Yeah,
cold.
but not so cold.
So, right.
Exactly.
Yes. All right. I think we're at point number 10 on the list, which is seek help if necessary.
Yeah, so if all else fails and you're not in alignment with any of this and you need to seek help, that's where you need to go. Either there's what they call financial therapists that are out there. I'm not one, but I do
Mhm.
know some that will help couples get on the same page with their money. Because as you mentioned before in your opening, money can be a form of contention where it has definitely led to divorce,
Mhm.
deal breaker on people being together, and those sort of things. So really understanding if it's going to be a form of contention before you give up on it, maybe you seek help with a financial therapist. If you want to do kind of more of a behavioral piece, I do that as well. So maybe a financial advisor, if you want to seek help with putting some of your the action plan in place as it relates to your financial goals as well. And then if all else fails, couples therapy or marriage therapy helps. I
Mhm.
know I always suggest people earlier on before they get married really understand and take some of these tests where see if you're compatible financially as well, along with some of the other things in terms of
Mhm.
compatibility. But that you will understand where you score on the money scale when before you even get married. And I've
Mhm.
actually met with couples prior to them getting married as well to understand where their money philosophies are, understand the different money habits and behaviors that each one of them have, and then understand kind of setting the rules of engagement on how are you going to operate with it. Are you going to have separate accounts? Are you going to have joint accounts? Or if one salary is bigger than the other, is that a form of contention? Because sometimes
Mhm.
guys don't like to make less money than their spouse. Is that going to be an issue? Those sort of things is what would be discussed in either a financial therapist, maybe a financial advisor relationship, just to understand uh, how people are operating, and if they can't come to the table, like I said, to get on their own, having a third
Mhm.
party may help.
All right. Well, I don't see any questions coming from anyone. And I had the question about the financial date night, but
Mhm.
you explained that to me. So
Yes.
um, I think we might be at a point where I'm going to ask you if there's anything else that that we haven't discussed that you'd like to add?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground in this call, as it relates to love and money, and money and marriage. Because
Hmm.
like I said before, and what you mentioned, um, if you leave this area of your relationship unaddressed, it could
Hmm.
fester and it could
Hmm.
lead to a lot of turmoil, and could eventually lead to divorce. So opening up the line of communications, making sure you understand your spouse as it relates to their money behaviors and habits. Uh, be willing to compromise if you do need to, not too much, but it's more of an understanding, so to speak. So the values-based discussions are always good. Really, even if you don't do it in an exercise like I explained it before, just having a conversation with your significant others, like, hey, what do you value in life, and
Hmm.
understanding what that is. Because sometimes people never even have that conversation with their partner to
Hmm.
understand how are they operating from a life perspective of what they value as well.
Hmm.
And in during these exercises that I have done with couples, they have learned a lot about each other as well, is that they haven't had that conversation before. And so they learn some things as well. So even if you do it kind of on your own, learning what the values are, that's really good. And then understanding not so much the money quirks, but if it's a cultural or a religious type of thing, making sure you just understand where people are being operated. So as it relates to kind of overall marriage, money, love money type of situation, just be understanding and open the lines of communication, know where people are coming from. And like I said, if all else fails and you need some assistance, make sure you seek help before things go off the rails, because you don't want that. You
Hmm.
seek some help before that happens.
All right. Well, thanks, Pam. As usual, it's been
Mhm.
great talking to you, and I thank you for being my guest and for providing us with this excellent checklist to help us wrap up February, the month of love. I'm looking
Yes.
forward to our next discussion, which we do have a schedule change to let everybody know. Instead of being on the fourth Thursday of the month, it looks like in March we're going to meet on Wednesday, March 23rd at this
Hmm.
same time and location. So we will send out information to remind people about that well before the March call, but I just wanted to set the understanding for those people who are here tonight that that's a change that they might want to note on their calendars. And
Hmm.
thanks to everyone for joining us for this great call with Pam Sams. If you have questions after the call, you can feel free to email Pam at pamela@jacksonsams.com. And I usually spell that. So PAMELA or go to her newly updated website at www.jacksonsams.com. And while you're there, you'll be sure to find out why Pam selected the swan as a company logo, which I like that story. And I think about it. It stands for sleep well at night. I
Yes.
love that. So, but still go to our website. And now, if there's anything that the people listening would like to know about the National Association of Baby Boomer Women, you can go to our website, nabbw.com. We have a forum at Boomer Women Speak, and our Facebook page is facebook.com/nabbw. So I think until we discuss and announce what the topic for March is, that's all that we have for everyone tonight. So
Yes.
thanks so much,
All right.
everyone, and
Thank you.
Pam for joining us.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.